right. All right. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to start.
Shalom.
I think we're on like Hine Matov. You can find it on like page 10 or 128 if you're in the big book. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's good to be together. Why don't we take a moment to greet each other? So please say Shabbat Shalom to someone nearby. Introduce yourself.
If you'll turn over to page 24, we're going to greet the angels of Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem. Here we go. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Bimelech, Malchei HaMalachim,
it's my pleasure to invite up Oliver Sachs and his family to light the Shabbat candles. So Oliver and Sandra and Emma and Diane and Marjorie. Todd, you should come too. Oliver's going to celebrate becoming bar mitzvah this weekend. And he'll lead us in the candle blessing on page 2 or 120. We'll turn to Words of Kiddush, page 5 or 123. Come on, it's okay, right here. Yes, go stand next to him. Stand behind him. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit. Ki hu yom tehillah lemikrae kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim. Ki banu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim. Shabbat kodshecha v'yahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Amen. Have a drink. Well done. That's all right. Pretty good. You should drink the rest. Well done. If you want to. It's not that good. So we have really an embarrassment of riches tonight. We are welcoming not one, but 2 brand new members of our community. So I'm going to put on my mask to make sure we keep these folks super healthy. So we will invite up our first new baby. Gabrielle, if you'd like to come on up, you can bring your parents with you. So we'd like to invite up Dave and Joanna and grandparents Janice and Ron Neymark. We also want to say hello to Helene and Joe Tischler, the other proud grandparents who are watching on the East Coast. And as they make their way up here, there she is. Oh, she is dressed for the occasion. Yeah, come right here in the middle so we can see you all. So we first have, we have a blessing from your grandparents, if you would read that for us.
We are grateful for new beginnings, for the bond of new life that links one generation to another. Today, in the presence of this gathered community of people, a family, we can really read, in the miracle of new life. We rejoice with Joanna and Dave at the birth of their daughter, our beloved granddaughter.
May they grow together as a family in health and in strength, their home filled with blessings throughout the years ahead.
Should have some Kleenex up here, I'm sorry. Now we'll hear from proud parents.
We have been blessed with the gift of a beautiful little girl. She is the latest chapter in the unfolding of our lives together, an expansion of our journey as individuals and as a family. We have been transformed by her arrival, and our lives will never be the same. We are grateful to bring our daughter into a community that greets her with love and honor. We pray that we may continue to be worthy of the blessing and responsibility of parenthood.
Today we formally bestow upon this child the name by which she'll be known in the Jewish community and by which she will be called on all the significant Jewish occasions of her life. Mishaberach Avotenu V'imotenu. May the one who blessed our fathers and mothers before us bless and sustain through her parents' loving care this beautiful child, whose English name is Gabrielle Reina Neymark Tischler. Let her be known among the Jewish people by the Hebrew name we give her today, Avriel Rachel Bat Asher David Vedona Johanna. Gabrielle, you are named in memory of Joanna's great-aunt Regina, Dave's Aunt Rosa, and Dave's great-great-grandmother Rachel, and your name Reina, or Rachel. Reina, we know, means queen, and you are very regal tonight. We know that you will bring great honor to the Jewish people and to this family who already love you so much. So if you'll repeat after me, community. Kashem, Shanich Nasa, Labrit, Ken, Tikanes, La Torah, Lechupa, Ulma'asim Tovim. As she has entered the covenant today, so may she be led to the study of Torah, to a life of love, and to deeds of kindness and compassion. Amen. We're going to sing to you in just a minute, but we're going to sing a big mazel tov to both babies. So we'll invite you to sit for just a moment, and we'll give you this.
Thank you.
I didn't mix up the names, I don't think. We'd like to invite up Paula Levy and Jim Reiner, and Isaac, big brother Isaac, and our newest friend, whose name will be announced in just a moment. Oh, he's ready. He's like, yes, I got this. All right. So we'll ask Paula and Jim to share these words with us.
We have shared love and pain and joy in bringing our son into life, and have been privileged to participate in the wonder and beauty of creation. Dear God, for the gift of this child, we give thanks and pray that we will be worthy of the blessing and responsibility of parenthood. Grant us strength of body and spirit as we strive to nurture and educate our son. May we always remember to cherish the precious gift of his life.
Today, we formally bestow upon this child the name by which he will be known in the Jewish community and by which he will be called on all the significant Jewish occasions of his life. Mishaberach Avotenu V'imotenu. May the one who blessed our fathers and mothers before us bless and sustain through his parents' loving care this beautiful child, whose English name is Aaron Levy Reiner. Let him be known among the Jewish people by the Hebrew name that we give him today, Aharon ben Rivka. And he has been given the name Aaron because Aaron was a very good brother. Does anyone remember whose brother he is? Slightly more famous, right? And we know that Aaron also has an excellent brother, Isaac, who has already taken on the big brotherly duties of calming baby Aaron and giving him bottles. And we know that they will love each other and support each other through their lives. So please repeat after me. Keshem, Shenichnas, Labrit, Ken, Yikanes, LaTorah, LeChuppah, Ulma'asim Tovim. As he has entered the covenant today, so may he be led to the study of Torah, to a life of love and to deeds of kindness and compassion. And for both of our newest members of our community, we sing. Continue our service on page 20 or 138 with the words of Lecha Dodi. We'll sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, and when we get to that last verse, we'll rise and welcome in the Sabbath bride.
La B'nei Shabbat V'kabel
We turn to page 28 or 146 for the call to worship the Baruch Hu. We're going to pray our prayer of love. The words will appear on the screen. Remind us that the Torah is a gift of love, eternal love.
We are love.
page 34 or 152.
Shema
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Please be seated. We turn now to our Song of Redemption on page 40, and let these words be a little prompt for you that Pesach is just 2 weeks away. So start getting ready. Send out your invitations, get out the plates, clean the home. It's time to get in the mood. It's time to get ready for Pesach. We sing Micha Mocha, page 40.
Adonai et Yaakov, v'ge'alo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
As the war in Ukraine enters its 7th week, and as terrorism has returned to Israel, we call out for peace with these words of Hashkivenu, page 42. Pray as if everything depended on God. Act as if everything depended on you. Tefillah begins on page 46. Please rise.
Ya la la, la la, 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 ya la la, la la. Adonai, sefatai tiftach. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevi Geulah livnei v'neihem, Leman Shemo v'Ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah Rav le'Hoshia. Mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofeh cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha bal gevurot, Omidom elach, Melech le'mit u'mechayeh, U'matzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
We continue privately through page 63. And when you have completed your prayer, please be seated.
Yesterday was Transgender Day of Visibility, and in honor of that day, we thought we'd offer this prayer, a Asher Yatzar. It's a prayer for our bodies, and we recognize that wherever one is on the gender spectrum, there are moments in which we sometimes have complicated relationship to our bodies. Sometimes they give us a hard time. Sometimes we give them a hard time. But we want to say to our friends and family in the trans community that we see you and we love you just the way you are. So we'll offer this prayer.
I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize I am beautiful and whole. I'm perfect the way I am, and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. Sing with me, whoa.
On page 253 or 371, we turn to our prayer of healing, physical healing, mental or spiritual healing, healing of body, healing of spirit. We wish all those who need it a refuah shlema, a full and timely recovery. In particular, this evening, we're sending healing prayers to Deb Altschuler, Tina Aronowitz, Susan Carlson, Brian Covert, Rudy Andrizzi, Philip Gershader, Terry Gibson, Selena Glader, Anita Holzberg, Dorothy Huppert, Moritz Huppert, Marvin Jones, Harold Muckamal, Nick Pasquale, Rabbi Lori Phillips, Peggy Pizzo, Diane Rolfe, Stephen Avraham Simon, David Baruch Ben Simona, Matthew Smith, Nikki Sokol, Donna Spanger, Brown Taylor, Nicole Gent Wickenheiser, and Ron Marks. If there's someone that you're thinking of, I invite you to share their names with our community as well. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Daniel Sokach, who has served as the CEO of the New Israel Fund since 2009. During the past decade of extraordinary challenges, the New Israel Fund has risen to new heights as the great defender of justice, democracy, and equality in Israel. NIF is the largest non-governmental organization working for democracy and equality for all Israelis. Before joining NIF, Daniel served as the executive director of the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, the Peninsula, Marin, and Sonoma counties. Prior to his tenure at the Federation, he was the founding executive director of the Progressive Jewish Alliance, now known as Bend the Arc. In recognition of his leadership, Daniel has been named 4 times to the Forward newspaper's Forward 50, an annual list of the 50 leading Jewish decision makers and opinion shapers. He has contributed articles to leading newspapers and magazines, including the New York Times, Washington Post, the Forward, and Haaretz, and is the author of the book, Can We Talk About Israel? A Guide for the Curious, Confused, and Conflicted. Daniel holds an MA from the Fletcher School at Tufts University, a JD from Boston College Law School, and a BA from Brandeis University. He's married, father to 2 daughters, and lives in San Francisco. And I will just add that I had the privilege of working for and with Daniel at the Progressive Jewish Alliance as an intern back when I was in social work school. And I say privilege because I still feel so fortunate to have been able to spend a year getting to sit with Daniel one-on-one regularly throughout that year. A chance to gain insight into his vision, his wisdom, his passion for justice, his sense of humor, his warmth, and his menschlichkeit. I have a vivid memory from probably around early 2006. It was following the Hitnadkut, the disengagement from Gaza. And it was during the elections that were happening in Gaza just a few short months after that. And I just have this very vivid memory of Daniel shouting out to the entire office regular updates throughout the day or 2 days as election results in Gaza started coming in. And then a similar experience a few months later in March of that year around the Israeli elections for Knesset. And this was at an organization whose primary focus was not Israel. It's just a small indication of Daniel's true passion for Israel. So, Daniel, it's a pleasure to welcome you here. There you are, excellent. Let's dive into your work at New Israel Fund, and in particular, your new book, Can We Talk About Israel? It's just such an honor to welcome you here to Beth Am.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. It's an honor to be with you, and I'm so glad that you saved my most important credential, which was working with you for the end. And those elections didn't turn out so well, did they?
Not.
Those ones in Gaza that we were waiting to see what would happen, but that's life.
Yeah, there was a lot of optimism early in the day, and it got darker as the day went on, I remember. So I want to ask you, there are a lot of books about Israel or about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the shelves these days. I'm curious to just hear from you, what was your sense of the need for this book, both in terms of your approach and also the timing?
Well, of course, there are so many books about Israel, and one could be forgiven for asking, why do we need another? And for me, there were really 2, I guess, related reasons. First, it's especially appropriate and powerful to talk about this tonight with you, because over the course of my career, the 20 or so years I've been working on these issues, and in one way or another, we've seen that discourse get more and more vituperative. that could actually, as I said earlier, hold with compassion both of the parties to the conflict, with curiosity, with concern, one that would approach their claims to the place, the land, as well as their traumas and histories of dispossession, displacement, and discrimination with an approach that recognized the legitimacy of all of that. That both of these parties are, in the words of the Israeli historian Benny Morris, righteous victims, people who have been victims of the world, of themselves, of each other, and who now are fighting over this small piece of territory. The other big story, and I didn't want to write one of those books, and even though I'm a product of the liberal Jewish community and a proud liberal Zionist, I had no interest in trying to get involved in the Israel wars, as I sometimes think of them, when it comes to the discourse out there. The other big category of books are books that are by and for experts or academics or scholars. And those books are very important, but they lack an accessibility. And I wanted to write something that was even-handed and balanced, and as I said, compassionate, and also accessible. And I felt that the books that served me best as a younger person and helped me navigate these issues, books like Thomas Friedman's From Beirut to Jerusalem, David Grossman's book, The Yellow Wind, where he interviewed Palestinians on the eve of the First Intifada, and then later this great Israeli novelist and nonfiction writer went and spoke with Arab citizens of Israel and gave an insight into their lives. And most of all, the book In the Land of Israel by the late great Amos Oz, the novelist and essay writer and peace activist, who wrote this book in 1982, which really sort of provided a literary landmap that was fairly prophetic and an introduction to Israel. And I hoped, in my modest way, I could contribute to the debate in that way.
Wonderful. So as someone who I know is regularly in conversations with folks from across across the spectrum of Israeli society, through your work, and I'm sure through your travels for this book as well, I'm wondering, given what's been going on over the last 10 days or so, wondering if you can just share some of your own thoughts and reflections, or perhaps a bit about what you're hearing from Israel these days about this latest wave of terror attacks.
Well, people, of course, in Israel are New Israel Fund's grantees, my friends in politics and in the activist world are very, very concerned and upset and deeply worried about the future. Many of us here tonight will remember that it was just over a year ago, in May of 2021, when there was an outbreak of violence between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. And the sort of before that, the situation and tensions rose and were exacerbated over issues having to do with evictions of Palestinians in East Jerusalem by that were being pursued not only by the Israeli government but also by organizations representing Israeli settlers. So these protests and demonstrations and lawsuits that had been working their way up, by the way, for a decade or so through the Israeli court system, and we were on the eve of a high court decision when tensions kind of reached their height, and they reached their height. So in Jerusalem, always a tinderbox, there was a big conflict about fundamental issues that represent for both sides the nature of this conflict. eye of those citizens and say you're not equal. I'm talking about laws like the nation-state law and the Nakba law. And these various politicians who formed the new government realized that they had to pull Israel back from the brink. And you asked for my observation, so my personal observation is there's a lot to say about that coalition, and we don't know how long it will last, and we don't have time for that tonight, but I think they are trying their best to de-escalate and pull Israel, in terms of Israeli citizens, Arabs and Jews, back from the brink. And I go into that sort of deep history to answer your question, Rabbi, about what's happening now, because the terror, of course, is horrific and unacceptable. I think it's not a very controversial thing to say that terrorism and violence are never acceptable and never acceptable ways to pursue your political goals, in my opinion, and New Israel Fund's opinion. And terrorism and violence too often provide a pretext for the extremists on the other side, right, depending on who's perpetrating it, to ratchet up their incitement. And sure enough, for weeks we have seen ultra-right-wing, ethno-nationalist Jewish militias trying to organize in the Negev to essentially deprive Bedouin citizens of Israel of their land and of their territory, and to sort of build out their vision of an ethno-nationalist Jewish supremacist state. Well, murderous terror attacks by ISIS-affiliated Palestinians only give them ammunition, rhetorical and real, in promoting their extremist view. So I think that in addition to the awfulness of the terror, which I think, why is it happening now? It's happening now for a number of reasons. One is that extremists understand that these are moments of incredible tension. It is Ramadan. I believe tonight it begins. Pesach is next week. Easter is on Sunday. So we're once again at a place where the tensions are rising, as they always do, when the major religious festivals converge, which extremists on all sides use as sort of an excuse to ratchet up their rhetoric. So that's number one. Number two, many of you noticed there was a conference in the Negev a few days ago that included Israeli, Egyptian, Gulf state, and American representatives. Secretary Blinken was there. This is a big deal, right? It is part of a process of Israel normalizing itself in the region, and I think most of us all of us should pray that that's successful and that it continues. And there are Palestinians who are very concerned that this will leave them behind, and their conflict and their troubles will be forgotten. Now, the vast majority of Palestinians, of course, react to that peacefully through demonstrations, through op-eds, through writing, through voting. But there are extremists who don't, and I believe that was another reason that terrorists use this period of time to strike. And then finally, this is not always easy to say, but I believe it is an honest thing to say. There is a deep frustration in the occupied territories and with people who sympathize with Palestinians in the territories, because we're now at 54 years of the current status quo where Israel's occupied this territory. And even though for the last few months the settlement enterprise has sort of frozen because the new administration, the new coalition, is made up of such ideologically diverse groups, they can't pursue controversial tactics. They don't want to upset the Biden administration or the EU. And all three of those parties, the Israeli government, the Biden administration, and the EU, don't want to see the return of Benjamin Netanyahu, who will benefit from chaos and discord. So whenever these things happen, the risk is that the extremists, the Hamas and ultra-right wingers in the Palestinian side, and the ultra-right ethno-nationalist settlers on the Israeli side will gain. And when there's chaos, and when the government is blamed for chaos, that could augur the return of more inflexible voices on both sides in both camps.
Thank you so much. I mean, I so appreciate your insights and this notion of communication and conversation, between all of these such polarized factions, and appreciate the role that NIF plays in helping to create spaces and fund those organizations that are creating the spaces to actually bring these different sides together. I want to ask one more, hopefully sort of short-ish question about about the book. I love the invitational nature of the title, right? Can we talk about Israel? It feels really inviting, and certainly once you dive into the book, it's really accessible, as you said, and the tone really does feel different than some of the other books about the conflict out today, or other books that I've read, whether for school or just for sort of consumption. You open your book in the third paragraph, right? Israel. I mean, is there any other topic on which so many intelligent, educated, and sophisticated people express such strongly and passionately held convictions, but about which they actually know so little? The problem is, I told you he's funny. The problem is compounded because these people on all sides of the issue think they know what they're talking about. They sincerely believe what they think to be true. So I'm curious to hear from you. Why do you think it's so hard to change hearts and minds about Israel?
First of all, I'm glad you said that because you're asking questions that make it hard for me to be funny. These are serious questions, so I'm glad you read that passage. Look, I think that Israel is, if not, I'm sure it's not the only, and we can come up with a few other examples, but it's an issue that is so emotional for so many people because of what they learned from their parents and their grandparents and at shul or church or mosque. And what they read and what news they consume and what messaging they hear and whether they watch Fox or MSNBC or CNN, whether they read Haaretz or the Jerusalem Post or the Times of Israel or Al Jazeera. So there are so many factors that contribute to these powerfully held emotions about Israel. And the reason I believe that these emotions are so powerful is that, look, we understand it as Jewish community members, right? Because in many ways, right, Israel this is in my opinion, is as difficult and challenging and troubling as it can be to wrestle with this. It's like the great miracle of modern Jewish history. At a moment when Jews when there was an effort to kill us all, right? That came right before finally the realization of this dream that there could be a place where Jews could just be free to live and to express their own self-determination. And so, for many of us, criticism of Israel, even legitimate, reasonable, and in my opinion, accurate criticism of Israel, let alone the stuff that is not reasonable, legitimate, or accurate, is often felt as an attack. And we get very defensive because of our recent history of horrific trauma. And that's not even mentioning sort of the religious aspects for so many of us, and the fact that we're at Pesach when we're going to say next year in Jerusalem. So for us, it's deeply emotional, and anything that's perceived by people as being an attack or criticism of Israel is sometimes seen as anti-Semitic and illegitimate. And that's complicated by the fact that some of Israel's defenders and sometimes official Israel likes to characterize any criticism of Israel, even legitimate criticism, as anti-Semitic or illegitimate. And that's just the Jews, right? Then you have one of the most interesting groups that I researched and spoke with when writing the book, evangelical dispensationalist Christians, who for them, Israel and we, the Jewish people, are part of their theology. We're part of a pretty shocking for many of us, end times apocalyptic theological resolution of history. And so they feel very emotionally about it. And I think we all understand why Palestinians and their sympathizers feel emotionally. So we have these deep emotional reasons why we're connected to this place. We don't always act rationally. And then finally, Israel reminds me sometimes of the parable of the blind men and the elephant, right? Stumbling through the jungle, they come across an elephant, and each one reaches out and touches a part of the elephant, and they're certain that what they've encountered, that's the whole story. So one says an elephant is like a tree trunk-like creature with toenails, and one says no, it's a long, sinuous trunk-like creature, and one says it's a floppy ear-like creature. You get the idea. And here's the thing, they're not actually wrong, right? The elephant is the thing they've encountered, that they're sure because they see it and feel it must be the elephant. It's just that they don't realize there's more to the elephant. It's bigger than just the piece they're encountering. And that metaphor works well for me when it comes to Israel, and I think it's part of why it's so hard to talk about it, because we just see a part of the elephant that we're encountering, and it's really difficult to pull back and see the larger creature, and that's part of what I try to do in the book.
Well, Daniel, listen, I just want to thank you again for being with us tonight. for writing this really incredible book, which I've already found to be just such a valuable tool for teaching our teens here at Beth Am about the complexities and the nuances and the many and varied stories and narratives at play in Israel and throughout Israel's history. I hope that you tell Dana thank you for letting us borrow you tonight. I hope you enjoy Shabbat dinner with Dana and the girls. And I also want to just take a moment to point out Orly Bine, who's here with us tonight, also from the NIF. She's the senior director of our San Francisco region of New Israel Fund, who also grew up here at Beth Am and celebrated her bat mitzvah up here, I think. Orly is really a wonderful resource for those listening tonight who would like to learn more about how to connect with the New Israel Fund and get involved in the amazing work that they do. Orly, thanks for being here. I know you're going to stick around for a little bit after services if people have questions about NIF or anything that Daniel said are going to get punted to you. So hopefully, Daniel, thank you again for being with us. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you again. Take care.
Thank you, Pete, and Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Shabbat Shalom. We will continue our service now with Aleinu L'Shabeach on page 282 or 586. Please rise.
Aleinu L'Shabeach L'Adon HaKol, Latet Gedulah Yotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu Kegoye Haratzot, Velo Samanu Kemishbechot Ha'adama, Shelo Sam Chelkenu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, V'anachnu Koreim, Umishtachavim Umodim, Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Page 287.
V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Ask you to remain standing as we turn to words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. And this week, we are in the period of Shiva, the first week of mourning for Rick Nelson, cousin of Shauna Midler, and in the period of Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning for Carol Emmerich, Henry Berger, Michael Pearl, Ernie Milo, and Joan Lerner. We add to their names the names of the Israeli terror victims of the last 10 days. Amir Hori, Arab Israeli, 32 years old. Rabbi Avishai Yechezkel, 29 years old. Rabbi Yaakov Shalom, 36 years old. Dmitry Mitruk, a Ukrainian citizen who was 31 years old, living in Israel. Victor Sorokafut, also a Ukrainian citizen, 23 years old, living in Israel. Shiriel Abiukart, 19 years old. Vizan Falach, who was Druze, 19 years old. Laura Yitzchak, 43 years old. Rabbi Moshe Karbitsky, 50 years old. Dorit Yachbas, 49 years old. And Menachem Yechezkel, 67 years old. This Shabbat also marks the yahrzeit, the anniversary of death For David Benjaminson, Eunice Meltzer Berman, Marjorie Braun, Richard Anthony Busey, Paulina Chalfin, Raphael Churgan, Nathan William Citron, Helen Cohen, Albert Davidson, Georgiana Weitzel DiFilippo, Gail DeMaio, Pam Emerson, Herbert Feldstein, Sonia Fishback, Mildred Fogel, Dr. Irwin Gainan, Barbara Margaret Gobudi, Seymour Graff, Gladys Gross, Sarah Cohen Groen, Marga Grunwald, Patricia Hodges, Bassa Kaplan, Harvey Carlin, Joseph Kumin, Abo Hozioski, Helen Kirsch, Henry Colm, Arkady Kruti, Isaac Lerner, Milton Levinson, Claude Levy, Rosalind Lifton, Ben Lipson, Ludmila Livshitz, Irving Miller, Kiyoshi Morita, Nancy Packer, Shirley Personette, Miriam Polish, Sala Price, Miriam Resnick, Thomas Salter, Peter Salzer, Doris Salzer, Robert Sachs, Hilda Slotnick, Louis Smerling, Samuel Soffer, Rachel L. Stein, Sharon Storms, Aaron Stranger, Ruth Tarnopolsky, Abram Vilgo, David Wasserman, Grace Whedon, Harold Usum, and Jean Gruberman-Zlotnick. If there's someone that you are remembering this evening, I invite you to share their names as well. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. We read together the words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, be'alma divrach yirteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'olam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. I want to point out our tzedakah box, which is in the back of the room, in the foyer. You can give on your way out. You can also donate online or through Venmo. We're at Beth-Am. Our tzedakah organization that we're supporting this month is called the Pursuit of Excellence Scholarship Organization, which provides support to low-income, hardworking students, helping them fulfill their dreams of earning a college degree. POE targets high school seniors for whom the funds ranging anywhere from $500 to $7,000 a year can be a tipping point in their ability to attend college. We are also still collecting money to assist with refugees in Ukraine, and you can donate to that as well on our website. I invite you to give generously to both of these causes. Conclude our service tonight with Adon Olam on page 321 or 625.
Adon Olam Asher Malach Hai Didi Dai Didi Dai
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom. Take a piece. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.